This is my spoiler-free review of the War for Wakanda expansion in Marvel's Avengers. But what counts as a spoiler? Basically, if it wasn't shown in any of the marketing material before release, it counts as a spoiler. However, I'm only referring to War for Wakanda, so that means this video will contain spoilers for the Reassemble campaign, as well as the Taking Aim and future imperfect operations. So with that being said, grab your vibranium spear and let's get into this. As always, starting off with the story, the plot of War for Wakanda was definitely an enjoyable experience, and hands down, my favorite overall storyline of all of the DLC in this game so far. T'Challa is one of my favorite characters in the game, and I love seeing his interactions with the other characters in the story, and this expansion remedies a bit of an issue I had with the other operations in the game, which is that sometimes other characters don't appear in cutscenes. I always thought that was weird and kind of takes me out of the experience a little bit. The biggest offender to this being in Future Imperfect when you fight Maestro. We know Kate was with Clint at this point in the story, but she and none of the other Avengers show up when Hawkeye goes to fight him, so it makes it look like he was able to take him on one-on-one, which makes absolutely no sense. But thankfully, Wakanda does not have this issue, even in the final boss. So it does enhance the experience to actually be able to see these characters interact with each other and fight together. Another thing is that the voice cast did a fantastic job in their roles, and the people in charge of casting made absolutely wonderful choices. I can 100% say that Wakanda has the best voice acting Marvel's Avengers has to offer so far, and I would love to see this cast reprise their roles in future content for the game, and even other Marvel projects like an animated series. However, I feel like this expansion still doesn't remedy the villain problem this game has, where the villains feel underdeveloped and they kind of rely on you being familiar with the comics in order to understand everything that makes this character tick. Crossbones just shows up, gets beaten up a bit, and then leaves. So the way they hyped him up in the war table when they said, "Witness how the Avengers created their own enemy," was all for nothing. But I guess we'll have to find out more about that story later on. And Klawe, I felt like could have been fleshed out a little bit better, but I feel like out of all of the villains in this game, he suffers from this the least, other than Taskmaster, who I feel is the only villain that actually did get decent development, as his banter with Black Widow during A-Day got the point across. Klawe wasn't necessarily bad, I just thought there could have been a little bit more to him. Even in the campaign, MODOK is also a character that suffers from this, as they never explain in the game why he calls himself MODOK. They just expect you to know that from the comic books. Now on the gameplay side of things, obviously the two things this game always excels at is the story content and the gameplay kits for the characters. Black Panther has some pretty spicy melee combos, and I also like the vibranium daggers once you upgrade them. And I did actually get some Sonic gear for the daggers, and I feel like this is going to become the meta for Black Panther builds. And how I'm going to utilize this is that he will be a combination between a ranged and melee build, where I used ranged attacks to apply Sonic status to the enemies, then I ripped them all apart with melee. Other things I found satisfying with his moveset are his heavy combo finishers and his pounce ability, where if you hold triangle, you'll tackle somebody and then give them a beatdown while they're on the ground defenseless. It reminds me of the black suit in Spider-Man 3 and Web of Shadows. And another cool thing about this move is that you can upgrade it to utilize your intrinsic energy to even do this on enemies that would be otherwise resistant to it. And while I was writing this script, I discovered that this upgrade even works on the cargo runner. so do as you will with that information. And speaking of intrinsic, I actually have an incentive to want to use parries as the King of Wakanda, as parrying actually fills up his intrinsic meter, and when it's full you can double tap R2 to release all of that energy in a shockwave, which will give you a buff for a certain period of time. So far I do like the heroic abilities, but I think they're a little bit disappointing. Kimoyo Beads just sort of randomly does things. However, it can be upgraded to focus on healing teammates, which I find useful. The spear feels a little bit weird to use no matter what customization options I use from the skill tree. It really feels like its only purpose is to pin or stagger enemies, and it's not for damage. And Boss Chosen feels pretty underpowered for an ultimate ability. I almost feel like the spear should be his ultimate ability, but it would have to be more powerful as a result of that. The Wakanda biome itself is very pretty and bar none the best biome that has ever been added to the game so far. Even when I took my first step in Wakanda, I knew I was in for a treat, especially since the beauty of Wakanda offers such a nice break from the mediocre environment seen previously in the game and all of the cut, copied, and pasted aim floors that you spend about 90% of the game in. Just going through Wakanda's elevators feels fresh and new, which really does go to show how much we needed a break from all of those aim bases. One thing that's a standout feature in Wakanda is that they have puzzles in certain sections. And while the puzzles themselves are pretty easy, it's still a nice addition to the game, and this should definitely be something they do more of in the game, especially when we get raids in the game. Crystal Dynamics have definitely proven that they can do justice to iconic Marvel locations with this biome, so I'm really looking forward to when/if we get Asgard in the game, as well as a Kree planet, especially for a Kree planet patrol mode. In addition to the biome, we do also have a new Wakanda Outpost, which is pretty cool and bigger than I was expecting. I was expecting for the throne room and maybe another room or two to be the only things here, but it's just as big, if not bigger, than the helicarrier, which is cool. One thing that really bothered me about it though is the fact that the outpost has a fabrication machine, which just feels like a slap in the face and an absolute troll with the fact that the stupid cosmetic rework that's been going on for 5 months at this point, and getting close to 6 months, which is half of an entire year, still isn't finished. Another highlight of this expansion is the new Klawe Faction of enemies. So now one of the biggest problems that people have with the game, being that we've been fighting the same enemies for basically a whole year, has finally been remedied. But to be completely honest, I actually find the new enemy somewhat annoying to fight against. I feel like the spider bot should be a 1-hit, maybe 2-hit kill, but they're really durable for no reason and feel like a slug to kill, especially the big ones. And the big ones also do this move where, just like the giant tarantula enemies and Skylanders, they can web you and pull you towards them. And this move can drain a lot of your HP, but when this happens you basically have no time to react to it. And if the enemy is off screen, I don't think you even get an indication that this is about to happen, which is really BS. At first I feel like Klawe's human henchmen also feel like they take too long to defeat. However, now that I have leveled up Black Panther more, it's less of a drag to beat them. Although I do feel like when they gain their buffs, it's still a bit annoying to beat them. I do like that you can counter these buffs with the new Vibranium and Sonic gear, but another thing that really sucks is when they gain Sonic shields, it covers such a big AoE, and if you don't have a heroic ready, there's basically nothing you can do against these guys. And another thing about the Sonic shields is that this triggers the Sonic Disruption debuff effect, which not only makes it really easy for enemies to bounce you around like pinballs, but it makes pretty much the entire screen turn gray, which isn't so bad at daytime, But if you're doing missions at night, you basically can't see anything at all, and I feel like this effect would be able to give people seizures. I 100% agree with the community that this effect should be nerfed. I feel kind of 50-50 about the sonic shields. I understand that this is their way of making more challenging enemy types, but I feel more often than not they're an annoyance. And I feel like enemies that could feel this OP should be saved for the big stuff, like Ultron or the Kree. I mean, should the Avengers have such a hard time fighting regular human enemy with a shield number 2006? No. No, they should not. Imagine watching an Avengers movie and not even a supervillain. Just a regular human henchman pulls up a sonic shield, and Iron Man just goes, "Oh no guys, we're doomed!" And then Black Panther gets taken out in 2 hits, and Cap is blinded by being in the area of effect. Like I said, something this OP should have been saved for Ultron or the Kree, as they're the big heavy hitters, so it would at least make sense for them to prove a challenge against the Avengers. Just in general, I can get some enjoyment out of the new enemies, but the sonic disruption effect is an absolute buzzkill for me. And now the last thing, which is my biggest problem with the expansion, is that it released without the Wakanda Faction, which is especially disappointing as we basically waited a year for this DLC, and that means that it basically released unfinished. As a result of there being no Wakanda Faction, that means there's no new faction missions, villain sectors, or endgame content to do. So the only reason you'd ever return to Wakanda once you finish the story and some of the war zones is just for the heck of it. And we're just left to run the same content that we've been running for months or even a whole year, such as the Mega Hive or the Maestro villain sectors. I really hope the Wakanda faction gets added sometime next month. Otherwise, I'm probably just gonna get Black Panther to level 50 and then stop playing the game, possibly until the release of Spider-Man. So now it's time for me to answer the ultimate question. Now that the Wakanda expansion is here, should you buy Marvel's Avengers if you have not already? My answer varies from person to person, but my ultimate answer would be no. Wait to see what else they'll add to Wakanda, such as new villain sectors or endgame content, or just wait for Spider-Man to release. In general, I just recommend playing Genshin Impact instead. Sure, it doesn't have Marvel characters in it, but you basically get a similar experience with 200 times more content, and the game itself is entirely free! It seems like I was right about this expansion not being enough to save the game, as things seem exactly the same in the Marvel's Avengers community. That is overall a shame, but it's still not too late to save the game. I think Spider-Man will be this game's last chance for redemption, but even then, I think it's only gonna be like a 30% chance of that happening, due to the fact that Spider-Man is gonna be PlayStation exclusive, so that may turn off a lot of people from playing the game, despite how positive people are being. Plus, have you guys seen the data mine character list? Are people really gonna get excited over these characters as opposed to the heavy hitters like Black Panther, Spider-Man, or Doctor Strange? I don't think so, especially She-Hulk. Who even cares about She-Hulk right now? And she's supposed to be the next character after Spider-Man, so that's going to be such a waste of a character release to get people outside of the current small fan base the game has excited. And a waste of a character just means a higher chance that the game is going to get shut down. So that's my spoiler-free review of War for Wakanda. Thanks for watching. Wakanda forever.